Unathi, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
It is really a pleasure to have an opportunity to sit down and talk to you. You are by no means a stranger to many of us in South Africa or across the continent, having watched your career evolve over the past 18 years. We've seen you in everything from radio, television, animated series, and of course on South African Idols. But more than that, it hasn't just been about your professional pursuits. You've also really shared a lot of yourself, your challenges and triumphs with relationships, with body image, with depression. I'd like to know what gave you the courage, what really inspired you to speak so openly about your personal life and your struggles?
Well, I've always been raised to be honest and to walk in truth. I also entered the industry as a qualified journalist. So for me, it's never been about creating an image or putting out a certain perception of perfection out there. It's always been about seeking the truth. And that's where I come from. And I can't seek the truth if I don't walk or speak the truth. So for me, it's always been a part of who I am, whether it's in front of camera, behind camera, or in the privacy of my own home.
One of the things that you've been quite open about are some of your own struggles with body image. And we know that if we go to anyone's Instagram feed right now, it's filled with beautiful people. It's really the highlights, the highlight reel, not the day-to-day reality. For you, what, if any, impact did social media have on the ways that you viewed yourself and your desire to change your body and your appearance?
I think the first time I felt its impact was the year after I'd given birth to my second child. So I had my first child when social media wasn't around, but simultaneously I joined Idols. My first year was 2011, and that was the rise of Twitter, the birth of Twitter and your Facebooks, and the rise of Facebooks and Instagram. And coming back, it was very charming season 1 for me on Idols. They named my baby Idols. It was very cute and wonderful, and everybody was emphasizing, the maternal side of who I am and I guess what I was on Idols. But it was, I think, my second year back on Idols where it really became vicious. When you have social media and we're all operating from the palm of our hands, we don't realize the impact it has on the receiver. And I think in the beginning, people would like to say, it's not real, don't pay attention to it. But when you are reading a message from someone that says, you look like a stuffed fat cook, or your arms look like they're dumplings still boiling in a pot, nothing can minimize that. You're alone. You're dealing with the fact that your body has physically changed. You're dealing with the fact that you've gained 30 Ks. And I think ordinarily that's too much to deal with as an individual. But when you're a public figure, it's tremendous, because my battle was being okay with who I was, much heavier, being a mom, but also having to be this figure who's got it together and not being allowed to show that weakness. And I think I have a very rebellious side in me, and I didn't want to be trapped in that. And I think that's why I made it so public. Yes, I've gained weight. It's because I've become a mom. So for me, my secret was to isolate the bullies. So I went straight for the bullies to say, yes, I've gained weight, and yes, I'm 30 Ks heavier, and I'm a South African woman who's given birth, who doesn't have 3 chefs, a nutritionist, and 2 personal trainers, and 5 nannies to take care of my kids when I'm doing all of this. So let's do it together. But I think the one thing that did save me was I always said that I would get control back.
Practically speaking, you mentioned going to therapy. What were some of the other steps that you took really to rebuild your self-esteem?
Acceptance. I had to accept that I had gained that much weight. Acceptance in that there was a lot of work that had to be done. Acceptance in I didn't look like what society expected me to look like in the position that I was in. but also acceptance in the fact that I could recreate my narrative, and that's what was important for me. So the daily steps were affirmation to myself, weekly therapy, especially when I decided to divorce, physical therapy, in that I knew I had to establish a routine, because depression is smart. It's not going to announce itself. Hi, I'm here. It creeps in, you sleep a lot more, you sabotage yourself a lot more, you consume substances that allow you to be dependent more. So I had to accept where I was in all those places and slowly regain my independence. For me, which was working more, exercising more, going to therapy more. So it was accepting that I had lost control, and I had to just slowly get it back.
You said that depression is smart. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in. Looking back, when do you see that your depression first began to creep in?
For me, once I'd heard those words, "you are clinically depressed," I knew that I didn't want that to be my constant state, and I had to start therapy. So therapy's been a consistency in my life, but not just in the formal sense. Speaking with people and reading and doing those kind of things that feed me, because also what I've realized is I can't give from an empty vessel, and that's one of the things that I don't compromise on. I come first, communicating what I need to be able to be someone who can give.
We've seen you over the years, as I said, challenges and triumphs. And we saw recently a really challenging period for you when you went through your divorce. How did the rituals that you had established around self-care, the relationships that you had reestablished with your girlfriends, how did those things support you through your divorce and beyond?
I think it's important to realize that in the beginning, those things didn't even matter because I was so broken. I'm currently writing my book, and this is the first time I'm going to speak about it, but those things, you're in survival mode firstly, so I instantly developed a dependency on alcohol. So when it comes to routines and how do you go to the next step, those are secondary to survival. For me, I was dealing with the shame of not being able to keep up with the dream. Because they put marriage out there, and you're someone's wife and you're a mother. So for me, it was the shame of not being able to keep that up. Wanting to leave that so badly that I didn't care what that meant to society. I didn't care what that meant to the elder women. I just didn't have anything. So I went to the bottle because I needed to cope. Whether it was mourning the loss of the love of my life while I still had to see him every day. I was very devious during that phase, which scares me a lot. Because I'd have to rock up onto the idol set with everything together because nobody knew I was going through a divorce. And every Sunday night, I'd have to have it together and make someone else's dream come true. Whilst mine was crumbling. So it takes a lot of devious behavior as well, to be able to hide that from the world. And my therapist always says I'm very good at putting my masks on. And I say to her, because I had to. If I allowed myself to break down then, I don't know what would have been of me, professionally, socially. So when you speak of routines, that only comes once you hit rock bottom. And I hit rock bottom, and I allowed myself to stay there, because I think that's another thing that society wants to make you believe, and that is that you have to have it together. So I allowed myself to stay there because I knew it was passing, and I knew that I had to go through what I was going through then to be able to start building myself. So once I'd, was okay with being there, I started then introducing the routine. I was in therapy every week. I'd wake up 5 a.m. every morning. During that time, I stopped doing the breakfast show, so I still wanted to be up at 5 every morning. So that's when I would wake up and go to the gym, because exercising gives us endorphins, which are the happy drugs. So I knew those happy drugs would last me throughout the day, and that made me a more pleasant person. That helped me see more clearly and feel more. That helped me take on more projects. And being busy and having a routine then filled me, because then I could start having dreams and wishes. And then I started not being so afraid of the new me, because I didn't know who I was. Who am I? I've been in a relationship for 14 years. You immerse towards each other and you start morphing into each other. So I had to start asking myself, who are you outside of this relationship? And then I started discovering Joburg more, going to parks, going to food markets, starting doing things that I remembered I loved doing alone. And it's still a journey. I'm still discovering myself, but with less pressure from what I think or thought the world expected from me. And now it's more earnest, and now it's more honest and sincere. And I think being honest, whilst I was going, or still am on that journey, has helped me as well, because I don't think South Africa expects me to be perfect, which is a wonderful place to be. And it's a wonderful reality to have created and to be living in.
Practical question for you. There's a woman sitting at home who's saying, I really want to take control of my narrative, and I feel like I need help to do that. For you, what have been the things that have really helped you have effective relationships with your therapist, effective therapy sessions? What were the things that you looked for in psychologists or counselors? And what were some of the mind shifts you had to have in order to be able to really do the work on that couch?
Practically, this is something I teach young girls whenever I speak to them. The first voice that you hear in the morning is yours. Whether you're sleeping with someone in the same bed or not, the first voice you hear when your brain wakes up, whether it's alarm or if it's a chicken outside or if it's a car, the first voice you hear before you open your eyes is yours. What are you saying to yourself at that moment? Do you like what you're saying to yourself? Do you disagree? Do you agree? Do you dislike it? Are you validating yourself? Are you pulling yourself apart? Are you nitpicking, or are you building yourself? Be cognizant of what your voice is saying to you first thing in the morning. Just be aware of that conversation, then go about your day. At night, same thing. That last voice you hear is yours. What are you saying to yourself? Are you affirming yourself? Are you pulling yourself apart? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Write things down. Write down those conversations you have with yourself in the morning and at night. And as the weeks go by, you'll see that slowly shifting. Mm-hmm. The second thing I always, physically, as you were saying, first thing in the morning, write down 5 things you're grateful for. Whether you got to work on time today, meanwhile you've been late 4 days in a row. Mm. And that slowly changes the way you speak to yourself, the way you see yourself in the outside world, and it shifts it from a negative to a positive. Mm-hmm. And then you can start doing other outward things, whether it's speak to your pastor at church or someone at school or a colleague. Mm-hmm. It starts here. Mm-hmm. So it's those little things that we do that sound mundane, mm-hmm. but really make a difference in our day-to-day, that will make a difference in our week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year. Mm-hmm.
What I hear coming out of what you're saying is the sense of both rights and responsibilities. Mm. You have a right, absolutely, to live the life that you want to live the life of your dreams. But it's also your responsibility to create that life for yourself.
Completely.
And you've got to take responsibility first by hearing your voice. Mm. Secondly, by figuring out what that means practically. And thirdly, putting in place a real plan to make it happen.
Yeah. Actively doing the work.
Yeah. Unathi, thank you so much for sharing your truth with us and for being so open, not just in this conversation, but really over the years about the work that you've been doing, the steps that you've taken and the plans that you've put in place to make sure you really can live the life of your dreams and inspiring us to do the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.